The nation's newest military service still has a lot of work to do to chart its future. The Space Force had been planning to use the new Futures Command to handle that work, and it was supposed to be up and running by last year. That didn't happen as scheduled, but the idea is not dead either. Leaders say they're still planning a new organization to help shape the service's future, but they also need to make sure it aligns with the new administration's priorities. Details now from Federal News Network's Jared Serbu.
The Space Force first unveiled its plans for a new Futures Command almost 2 years ago. The idea at the time was to combine the existing Space Warfighting Analysis Center and the Concepts and Technology Center with a new Wargaming Center. Those plans were put on pause late in 2024 when it became apparent new political leadership was on the way. But General Chance Saltzman, the Chief of Space Operations, says Troy Mink, the Secretary of the Air Force, is on board with the overall idea.
I can confirm this 100%. Secretary Mink understands fully what we were trying to accomplish with Futures Command, with the activities, the importance of it. How are we looking at the future? How are we categorizing and characterizing the threats we're going to face, the missions we're going to be asked to do, and how are we going to respond so that we can put the force in place to meet those challenges, meet those missions. And so standing up this organization where we will look at concepts, we will do the wargaming, we will do the simulations, we will do all the assessment, the manpower assessment, we will do the MILCON surveys to figure out what facilities are needed, and then document that in the objective force so that everybody can see what we're progressing towards, what we think that end state, in the 15-year range needs to look like so that we can grow methodically and make sure we have those capabilities when they're necessary. So it is this idea of establishing a command that's focused on what is it we're going to need in the future and making sure all the planning is done, synchronized with the resources so we get that right. That's really the heart of the effort to make sure we get that right.
Saltzman speaking at the annual Space Power Conference in Orlando, Florida last month. And while the Space Force certainly isn't the first military service in recent years to contemplate a new command as part of big organizational changes, it is the first time in modern history that a service is having to do that from scratch.
The hardest thing, I think, is December of 2019, the law said there is a Space Force. And nothing could have been further from the truth. There wasn't a Space Force. It legally made there be a Space Force, but it was still in work. It was thought process. It was pulling things together as rapidly as possible. So I think the hardest thing is overcoming this mentality that there's been a Space Force for decades, for years. We've got all this figured out. There's processes. What do you mean you're still sorting out a uniform? Where's your uniform? These are hard things to do on a government scale with government oversight and government resources. And so the idea of convincing people that we had to start from scratch on almost every process we had, on every decision we make that was unprecedented, and convincing people that we don't really have anything to fall back on. If I don't deliver a service dress, then we're using an Air Force service dress. There wasn't something else. We had plenty of uniform changes when we were growing up, but there was always an Air Force uniform before those changes that we were in until we transitioned. Not the case for the Space Force. We've had to start from scratch, and convincing people that that's an additional hurdle. We're not just enhancing the Space Force, we're actually creating one. And that's been a real challenge.
The Space Force traces most of its roots to the Air Force, and until now it's leaned heavily on its sister service within the Department of the Air Force for combat support and other functions. But it's increasingly working to build infrastructure, doctrine, and culture of its own. As one example, Saltzman says just last month, the Space Force launched its own Captain's Leadership course. That initiative is a partnership with Texas A&M University and led by the Space Force's Space Training and Readiness Command.
The bottom line is each service brings something unique in terms of what it focuses on for professional military education. I remember General Raymond, when he stood up the service, talked about some of the things that services have to do. You have to have your own budget. You have to have your own doctrine. You have to develop your own people. And that's kind of stuck with me. We have to develop our guardians for the specifics of the Space Force. And this basic understanding at the captain's level is going to be foundational to what follows in the rest of their career. And so while we need to find ways to give them experience with other services, I wanted to make sure that the service had a core offering at that grade to educate our officers on the Space Force. Now, we're going to include joint doctrine. We'll include communications and leadership, but they need that foundational understanding of the service first before they start to branch out and figure out how they integrate with the other services.
And in 2025, the service graduated its first group of newly minted officers from Officer Training School. Those first 80 officers, Saltzman says, represent a mentality within the service that seeks to build multidisciplinary leaders. The enlisted force, he says, will be tactical experts, while officers will need expertise in joint integration.
Do we need deep expertise? Absolutely. Do we need people that broadly understand how to integrate with the joint force? Absolutely. How do you do both? I don't know. It's really hard. Like this is the tough part of the job, is you have to get that balance just right. So I think the best way to think about it is if you go down to kind of the micromanagement side of this and say, how do I develop a single guardian to best perform? Then you get caught in that conundrum. Do I want that guardian to be deep and expert in one particular area, or do I want them to have broad understanding? That creates a conundrum. At my level, I have to think about, what do I need the entire service to be able to do? Do I need deep experts? Yes. Do I need broad integrators? Yes. So we have to find a way to, across the entire service, create opportunities to maximize what people can do, what they do best, and fill the jobs that are required based on those skills and those competencies. So there will be jobs where we have to focus on depth. And there will be other jobs that have to focus on broader integration-type activities. And we want to give them the training, the education, the experiential opportunities to make sure the right person has the right skills and experience to going into those jobs. And so what I would ask is just to make sure you think about it from an enterprise perspective. And what might apply to any one guardian doesn't necessarily have to apply to all guardians.
Jared Serbu, Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.
You can find Jared's story at federalnewsnetwork.com.